Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today we're doing another installment specific for the Historic Metagame Challenge this weekend. We just had the past weekend was Standard Metagame Challenge. A lot of fun, won a bunch of packs. This weekend will be Historic. We'll follow that up with Explore and then Timeless. So a lot of fun, kind of competitive. The biggest thing with Historic right now is since the intervention or creation of Timeless, a lot of folks have kind of shifted. So the format's been somewhat not unplayed, but just lower volume, less discovered and explored, given that a lot of folks kind of moved over to Timeless. With that said, we're going to cover a bunch of deck lists that you can consider for the upcoming event. The biggest thing I find, Historic's pretty open. There's some kind of tentpole pillars, but you can generally kind of steal wins with various decks. These are not intending to be the be-all, end-all, but just some decks that either have high win rates that I was able to find, or can give you kind of some ideas. There's not a consensus like Artifacts exact build, but Retrofitter Foundry decks are super reasonable as well. You can check on my Aether Hub, any of the old ones. Should be relatively reasonable for the approach here. So as always, we get the data from UntapkedGG. We're also going to be looking at MTG decks, as well as one deck list at the end that I was speaking to someone who got #1 Mythic with at one point with in Historic in the last month. So another deck list there that we'll kind of highlight. You can see on the screen with Untap. I'll paste all these deck lists, by the way, in the video description. You could copy it there. If you want to use Untap, the link is in the video description, and kind of go from there. Usually we have a lot more popularity, but you can see popularity of the day. The format's just not heavily played in terms of volume of different decks right now, but also, so twofold. There's a lot of unique decks. People play like pet decks, stuff like that, but the kind of top of it is kind of narrow with like Wizards, Mono Green Devotion, like Yawgmoth decks, different combo decks, control decks that we'll kind of look at. So not too much can be yielded from here, but the decks that I'm going to be showing today are generally what you should expect. I'm personally going to try out Goblins most likely as well. I think they're reasonably suited now as well. Cavern of Souls helps the deck out as well. I just don't have an exact configuration right now because I'm going to put it together. But if I do the run on the weekend, I'll share how that goes. Looking at the stats, like there's only 5,600 games of best of 3 played in the last week. You'll see some of these win rates are very high as we look through it, in part because there's some players who play exclusively these decks. Like in the case of Yawgmoth, I know it's one player, Capella, plays like hundreds of games with it. It's kind of the go-to de facto. I'll use their Yawg list. At one point, they had stats where they went 52-0 with the list. So crazy kind of win rates with the deck. But we're going to start off with the Yawg deck. This looks like their most recent, and we got the addition of Imara, Voice of the Conclave, recent card from the Alchemy set. So it could effectively be a free cast spell in this deck through Convoke, and then when it enters the battlefield, you get to basically tutor or draft one of like the various Convoke cards, including Knight Errant of Eos, the Conclave enchantment that exiles. Pair that with like Ropeline Attendant, you can easily make a whole bunch of free creatures. The deck's kind of revolved around Yawgmoth with conjunction of Yawgmoth, Hapatra, lets you basically sack and then kind of loop. If you have 2 Yawgmoths, you can keep targeting each other with them and then loop them that way. With the addition of Blood Artist, you can drain your opponent out, which is a nice little combo there. You have Court of Calling that helps you find your combo pieces, and then just various kind of hate pieces, Skyclave Apparition, Haywire Might kind of mixed into there. Your sideboard's got a bunch of hate pieces as well. Juggernaut Peddler as like a Thoughtseize style effect, Fatal Push as removal, Phyrexian Revoker as activated ability hate, Graveyard Hate, protection from like removal, combo hate at times, just a flexible card to Boromir. Combo hate, more removal, grindy value of Elvish Chorus, Pylon as removal, and Skyfisher Spider as kind of removal that can be tutored as well. Moving on, we go to Mono Green Devotion. So again, don't focus so much on the win rates. These are like the highest versions of it, but like 18 games is literally, I had a Saturday free and I jammed out some games. So I think I played more than 18 matches in the Metagame Challenge on Sunday alone. Just playing the game, so it's not like an obscene amount. It's just that there's not huge amounts of data for this format. So Mono Green Devotion, kind of like the Pioneer Explorer versions, we have Karn, but we have the addition of Utopia Sprawl mixed into here. You have Vivian Arcbow, you're basically kind of comboing out, you find your pieces, Storm the Festival mixed into here. and then you have just a Karn board's worth of artifacts. Interesting that you could even potentially try out the new Archdruid's Charm in here, something that might be reasonable in terms of approach there. You have just various pieces, you name it, you can do it. Artifact Enchantment Hate, Graveyard Hate, Activated Ability Hate, Indestructible Hate, Lifelink Trample, our activated abilities, combo. You can basically, with Staff of Domination and enough mana, tap untap your various cards and just generate a huge amount of value. Basically drawing through your deck. With Nissa, you can animate like the Nykthos and tap untap and just kind of go crazy like that. Just a whole bunch of different effects. Your kind of combo turn, you could also search for a Chroma's Memorial, give your team haste, and win that way there. So just a lot of utility cards in the space in that regard. Moving on, we go to Izzet Wizards, one of the tentpoles of the format. The biggest addition here is they've got an access to Shove Aside as a new kind of bolt removal spell that if your opponent's on the play, you get to cast this at instant speed. In lieu of Sleight of Hand, I would probably play Opt or Consider. Probably Consider is a better one. Just instant speed has a lot more utility. I feel like people always play these like nuanced ones, like the Lord of the Rings ones as well, but the whole thing is with prowess, you can kind of play a little bit trickier and then play around that. Prior, it would make a little bit of sense into like Shieldred and stuff and Bowmaster, but Bowmaster is kind of nerfed out of the format, and Shieldred, you have 4 Flame of Anors to deal with creatures that way there. The core of the deck is kind of leveraging these powerful wizards, flashing back stuff, pumping your team, and smashing through a lot of damage. Jengant the Companion, activated abilities, more removal, just the various types of counters, interaction. Grind your matchups, you have Snapcaster Mage, Unlicensed Hearse, and Brotherhood's End as well for like the artifact decks. Temur Gates, surprisingly win rate here. So you're leveraging a combination of Primeval Titan. Instead of getting Field of the Dead, you're leveraging a kind of Gates package with like Maze's End as the primary win condition. Baldur's Gate generates a huge amount of mana for this deck. With Spelunking, your Gates come into play untapped, so it lets you kind of combo out that way there. Sweeper and Gates Ablaze, Guild Summit to draw you cards, Gatebreaker Ram as removal. The one kind of card I don't truly understand is Soulseer. Doesn't seem like it provides a whole much, like 3 mana to deal 5. I guess you're naming Shield, like hitting Shieldred, but seems just a little out of place in the deck itself in terms of various options that you can play in that. Even just playing another Sweeper could be more reasonable, just playing it from like a control perspective. It could make more sense, but you're kind of beating in that way when through activating your various lands. With this one here, interestingly, there's no Boseiju. Boseiju seems like something you may want to consider just as a cheap way to hit your opponent's like hate pieces. That could be something to consider as well through the games as you play. Banefire is just like an alternative when conditioned versus control. You can just burn them out that way there. Flame Blast Bolt is just cheap removal. You probably, in place of this, want to play Torch the Tower. Could be a more reasonable effect if you do have incidental things to sack, which in this deck you actually don't, so probably doesn't make sense. You can also like look in place of like Soulseers to play Fable the Mirrorbreaker. It helps you ramp, it loots through your hand, and then you can copy like Primeval Titan. That's like another alternative. I would probably like, honestly, even instead of like Banefire, because it's not guaranteed that it's going to win, I would either look at stuff like having a Myrex in the mana base could be useful, something you tutor up against control, or just playing any of the big threats like Tyrannix Rex, anything that's uncounterable, seems a lot more reasonable in that approach, just like pump through damage. Because they're not usually going to bring in, like keep that many sweepers in against you post board, I would imagine. Like just more targeted removals better, or counter spells. You may also want to look at something like Archdruid's Charm is another consideration to play main. Just gives you an ability to tutor up things. I would also probably play like a Cavern of Souls if resolving Primeval Titan's one of your key cards. Drannith Magistrate was played for like the Discover combo. You probably don't need it anymore because they kind of nerfed Geological Appraiser. You probably want things like Grafdigger's Cage for the Yawg matchup, could be good. Yasharn is a reasonable choice against that deck as well because it stops the sacrifice abilities. So you have a couple different options there. You have different sweepers. I would probably play like either Brotherhood's End or Supreme Verdict somewhere in the 75. You may also want either just like a Planeswalker package against control or just another alternative to kind of play around that. But give you some ideas in terms of the shell of the deck itself. 4-color Kethis combo. So this is quite an intricate combo, a little bit difficult to operate efficiently, but the core of the deck is you're using Kethis to play legendaries from your graveyard. Kinnan reduces the cost of, or makes any of your mana rocks tap for extra mana. So a combination of either Mox Amber or Relic of Legends lets you tap for extra mana. You can tap and tap with Rona to fill your graveyard. I guess the Soul Cauldron can also activate these abilities, so you can kind of get loops going with that, but basically you would generate enough mana and to keep repeatedly casting Jace the Perfected Mind, tapping and untapping, and kind of flipping your library over until you can cast Jace enough times to mill out your opponent. It's one of those decks that seeing it probably plays out easier, but it is somewhat of a difficult deck to navigate. Your sideboard's just kind of situational, like anti-hate pieces. You might see Arista be played against the Wizards deck or like heavy counter instant sorcery decks. Yasharn for any sort of sax decks. Minsc and Wu is the 5-mana version, not the 4-mana version like Timeless. And then Urza Ruinous Blast basically is a one-sided board wipe since all your permanents are legendary. Then go to Azorius Control. So a lot of different variations of this. You'll see some that are Yorion with Lotus Field, others not. But even though it got nerfed, it still is a good removal spell for Fragment Reality for your opponent's stuff. You just can't do the Geist shenanigans. Divine Purge, very strong against the various aggressive decks. A bunch of counter spells, Tempo of Elements available, Wandering Emperor Teferi, but then you also have kind of the pseudo uncounterable and Kalim that can just provide some card advantage and kind of cheat itself into play, which is nice. Also just being Tempo Elements against the aggressive decks. You have Restless Anchorage in here as another effect, like another creature land, along with all the Storm Giants mixed in for full 4 of Field of Ruins as well. The one thing you might want to try out in these decks now is some of the Surveil lands. It could be something of interest in the deck. Blessed Alliance is kind of an ode to the previous versions of the deck that were playing against Geist combo, stuff like that. You could probably forego this for more dedicated removal. Different types of counter effects, Graveyard Hate, Sweepers, Devastating Mastery, is just like a way to kind of blow up the board, blow up the world. Dream Trawler's an alt-win condition, and then Farewell. Interesting, no Shark Typhoon in these lists. It's something you maybe want to consider as well. Simic Merfolk. I always like these decks. So the most recent card that came in the deck is Merfolk Tunnel Guide. This provides boons, so basically think of it as like temporary emblems. So each subsequent Merfolk can enter the battlefield and explores. So it gets bigger that way there. You have Master Pearl Trident, Valdaean Hexcatcher, just a bunch of like Merfolk synergies, Sinnoh Scout, Mirror Regery to tap untap as well, which is nice. But you're playing kind of Merfolk synergies and beating into your opponent's face that way there. Collected Company can also kind of cheat into play. I would probably go the full set of Cocos and play 3 Sylvians. Just because they're legendary, they don't scale the best in terms of multiple copies of the effect. Lets you kind of go from there. There's also the enchantment that you may want to consider is another useful effect. If you're playing the Cocos, not as good. You can also then, if you play the, it's from LCI, whenever you tap a non-token Merfolk, you get a Merfolk token. You can play that with either Kumena, to tap each of your Merfolks to make more Merfolks. You can tap it with Smuggler's Copter, so there's a couple different avenues you can go. This is another deck that can leverage off the Cavern of Souls. Sideboard, you have like Grafdigger's Cage. Notably, if you're playing Cage, you want to get rid of Collected Company because it'll stop your company. There's Mistcaller that's very nice against like Yawg and stuff like that, things that are trying to cheat into play. Savage Swipe is removal. Spell Pierce is like tempo. In the kind of creature mirrors, you have Sentinel of the Nameless City. Fade from History as a way to blow up artifacts, enchantments. Sleep as a way to tap down like opponents' big boards and kind of beat them that way there. You can also, I would maybe think maybe 2 Spell Pierces could be reasonable. You're a little soft to like Supreme Verdict, but a lot of these decks will play like Divine Purge in that. Different options that you can play. I actually kind of like the enchantment. We played something similar in Timeless a while back, and I really liked the deck. It was really fun to play. Moving on, we go to Boros Convoke. So similar to the Standard and Pioneer versions, but you also get Kadoltha Rebirth, so just an additional kind of make tokens on sack effect. You have Esper Sentinel as well, which is both an artifact and a nice tax effect, so lots of powerful 1-drops. Case of the Gateway Express is removal and an Anthem, and then you play the full Convoke package in there as well as Ornithopter kind of mixed in. Really nice mana base in Boros. Sideboard, shove aside as removal, Dranith Magistrate as a way to kind of stop. Again, this is more to like the Discover combo. I think you can play Cage instead as a way to stop the either Cage or Containment Priest would work, because this doesn't stop like Collected Company or Court of Calling because they don't cast. They just cheat into play. So you want to attack it from those angles there. Invasion of Gobakan, kind of tax effect, Phyrexian Revoker, and then Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, for kind of just different types of tax effects. Moving on, so Ninjas is quite popular. This is kind of a demo. In Best of One, it's very strong, but kind of the core is your like a Ninja and Changeling package. So a lot of the Ninjas got buffed, so they're cheaper ninjutsu costs. You kind of play tempo elements, cheating into play. Changeling Outcast is unblockable, which plays really nice with the ninjutsu. And then it's also a Thopter, so it plays with the Retrofitter Foundry package. Same with Ornithopter. It's a 0-mana flyer that you can then recast that same turn. They moved a lot from Sheoldred's Edict because Geist is gone. Now they're playing 2 Bitter Triumph, 2 Cut Down, along with the Fatal Push Spell Pierce package, which is very nice. Sideboard is just various types of like removal, Dampening Spheres, nice against the control matchups. Disputes, Stone of Erich is a really nice card against Yawgmoth that you might want to consider in a lot of decks, that if you're not playing Sacrifice, has a lot of utility. Hand-Hate, and then Sweepers against a lot of the tribal kind of decks. Another deck that could be reasonable coming back is Humans. Black-White gives you access. The only thing I would say in this list here, you probably want Cavern of Souls in some numbers. Just giving you uncounterable as well, has some utility. So it'd probably cut like a Plains, probably cut like a Mutavault, and play maybe 1 or 2 Cavern of Souls in the deck. Sentinel for tax, protection with Giver of Runes. Notably, Giver of Runes is a cleric core, not a human. I learned that the hard way by trying to cast it off a Cavern on 1, and then realizing that this is not a human. Human, not human. Somehow a human, not a human. Thalia's for tax, Thalia's Lieutenant. So just to kind of go wide, hate pieces, some tax effects all mixed in. And then Inquisitor Captain does a nice job of being like a Collected Company style effect. Your sideboard's just got like grindier matchups, your Wedding Announcement, some removal, Jarina as protection, and then a way to exile graveyards, various removal spells, activated abilities, and protection spells like Brave the Elements. And then lastly, so the this list got #1 Mythic. We demoed it. Obese Ninja was a player. They got 225 and 87 with the deck. They hit Mythic rank 1. So it's mono red Madness. So you're leveraging cards like Faithless Looting with the arguably better art. I'm kidding. And then things like Gamble. You have Artillery. I don't like this view. There we go. So you have like Inti, which plays nicely with it. That you get the extra effects. Blazing Root Wall is a free to cast off Madness. Dragon Rage Chandler kind of surveils you, gets you value. Hollowed One can be cast as little as 0 mana. Kind of mixed in. Fiery Tempo gets cast for 1. You have Ox of Agonas. Gamble finds you pieces. Case of the Crimson Pulse. Avacyn's Judgment just as a big fireball effect. And then your sideboard's got a lot of individual hate pieces since you have Gamble to kind of tutor. It's kind of mixed into there as well. So this list went 225 and 87. So that's it for some choices. Let me know as always what you do well with. We'll try to stream some more of this I'm probably going to be playing Merfolk because I enjoy the playstyle of Merfolk. I may try Yawg, but it seems pretty big-brained, and I usually like chilling and playing games. And I'll probably play Goblins because I really enjoyed Goblins at the time. It was one of the decks that I've day 2'd with before, and just really enjoy the game style. But hope everyone has fun. We'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching. Have a great one.